Welcome everyone here to Marvelous Muglestons. I wanted to be able to show you here a painting that I recently did that I did not like. And I'm going to try to help you, save you your aggravation in some of your paintings by learning by some of the mistakes that I made. So then that way you have a better opportunity not to make the same mistakes in your own painting. So I'm going to go over a few things. Number one, the proper materials that you need when you're doing a watercolor painting, especially the board you use. I also want to talk about different ways to attach or hold your watercolor painting to the board. If it's in the form of clamps or tape or a different technique that I've liked in the past but did not work in this particular case. Also, in this format, it's more of an abstract painting. This is where when you apply the paint is either through a credit card or through a business card, and why it didn't work as well as I hoped so. And then the last two items is the spray bottle and the amount of water you used, as well as making sure you have clean hands. I'll show you at the end on that one. The first one is the board that you're used with the watercolor. What I did here is I went to Hobby Lobby and I got one of those poster boards. They're kind of plastic that you can pin things to. My thoughts were to clamp the paper onto it, and because it was plasticky, I thought the water wouldn't affect it too much. What happened is the technique that I've often used in the past is if you get your watercolor paper wet on both sides, on the top and on the back, it often will stick to your board and it won't buckle. With watercolor paper, because it is made out of either cloth or if it's made out of a wood material like paper is, it will buckle when you're adding and expand when you're adding the water. You can see even a little bit there where there was some ridges in the paper. So if you will have water on the top and water on the back, usually it will stay flat. In this particular case, what happened is because I went and soaked my paper beforehand in my tub to make sure that the paper was fully soaked, when I put it on the board ended up warping itself. Actually, here, I'll show you what ended up happening with the board, because I've got it. If you can see, the board warped, it wouldn't hold the correct. So the solution to it is you want to make sure you have a board that is definitely water resistant. I've used cutting boards, are fantastic. The new idea, and I'll show this in an upcoming video, is I'm practicing with a plexiglass. So the plexiglass definitely is waterproof, and it has a similar ability that if your watercolor is wet, you can put your watercolor paper on top of this plexiglass, but I'll demonstrate that here in a future video so you can see it. The second item that I want to tell you that I didn't like, or that I learned from a mistake in here, was definitely the application of the paint onto it. I was using business cards that were pretty stiff, but because the business cards themselves were still paper, they tended to have a little warping to it, and they didn't apply the paint well enough. I've done credit cards in the past, which I like. I wanted to try out something new in this particular painting experience. It didn't turn out to my favorite. The main thing I would recommend is being able to experiment and try. Find out what works well for you. Maybe a business card does work well for you. I would recommend that a credit card or a hard scraper that you can use like in the kitchen also is a good way to be able to apply the paint overall. Number three, the third thing that I truly learned in this experience overall is the amount of water matters. I have a couple of different water bottles. I've got my main water bottle that for doing this abstract, and I've got these little water bottles that are considered more wisp water ones. I've got these at Hobby Lobby also. The issue is because I soaked my paper before, it was plenty of wet. There's different watercolor techniques. There's wet on wet, there's damp on wet, and then there's wet on dry. In this particular one, it was definitely more wet on wet, which the end result became more of a muddy picture rather than keeping the pigments separate from one another to create a more dynamic picture. So when you're applying your water, make sure you don't over apply, because that will often just mix the colors together. If you've noticed that there's too much water, go ahead and damp some off, or just wait a minute for the water to dry before moving on to your other techniques on it. The last recommendation that I have on is making sure you have clean hands when working with the paper. I haven't noticed this so much in my other paintings with watercolor, but if you noticed on the top of the page, and actually here, I've got the finished product here. On the top of the page, you can kind of see my fingerprints. Now those fingerprints came just because my hands weren't clean enough. I think the oils in my hands created little patches of where the pigments of the paint came and collected. So rather than having a smooth sky surface, it ended up turning out where those pigments collected around the oils from my fingertips. That was a total rookie mistake, but it happens not too often. But make sure that when you're handling your watercolor paper, to make sure that you're handling it appropriately. As I review this video, I noticed that I'm not as disappointed as I was when I actually painted the picture. Originally, when it came out, I thought, oh, it doesn't look as dynamic as other paintings that I've done in the past. It didn't have any distinct clarifying points between a horizon in comparison to other ones in the past. But what I'm gonna do, so definitely stay tuned to future video. What I'm planning on is, even though this didn't come out what I fully liked, I'm going to go ahead and revisit this very painting and go ahead and add more on top of it. Maybe a boat or a tree line or something that will be able to give it some more distinction from what it is. As of right now, I'm just treating it as a very mystical background, and then I'll add more on top of it, so that way you can even save your paintings that you might not like. Thanks so much for watching. Consider subscribing, and have a fantastic day.